it's not only the vibe of the book, is it scary, is it ominous, is it gothic, what's the vibe of the book, but also that there's peaks and valleys in, like one time I watched a movie and I white-knuckled the chair the entire movie, and it was exhausting, and I felt sick at the end of it. So you've got to have some spaces where your reader can breathe, especially if you're writing something that's, dramatic.
Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Ihsan, and this is episode 150 of the podcast, and it is March 26th, 2024 as we record this. Tomorrow is my 50th birthday. So normally the podcast would come out on Wednesday, which is my birthday, which is why the podcast is coming out a day early. I have back-to-back appointments set up for my birthday tomorrow. It's going to be a spa day, you guys. That's what I wanted for my 50th birthday, was like a legit luxe bougie experience of massage and manicure and pedicure and coloring my hair, and then we're going to go out to dinner at a nice swanky Thai restaurant, and anyway, it's going to be rad. So that's why this is coming out today. And as you might have guessed, Eric is not here with me. He is not RVing, but he's road tripping. So the main topic today is going to be a solo show. It's going to be a recording of my talk from last year at one of the conferences. It was entitled Transforming Your Manuscript from Boring to Badass. So I thought it would be useful. It was a well-received, it was a masterclass that I taught at the Southwest Washington Writers Conference. And it was a cool little conference. So I hope you get a chance to go one day. Let's see. Thanks to all of our existing patrons for believing in us, in our work offline, and also here on the podcast. You can become a patron of the arts at patreon.com/Valerie Ihsan, IHSAN. You can get books there, writing instruction, coaching, planning, a lot of cool goodies. You can go to patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for short stories in the paranormal mystery genre. Also, very cool place to become a patron. Announcements. Registration is open for the 2024 Writercraft Writing Retreat and Workshop in Marcola, Oregon. At this point, there are only 3 private tickets left and 3 shared tickets. So go to valerieihsan.com/retreat for more information. There is I'm going to just say this once on the podcast. There's a total price listed. It's $9.99 for 3 nights and of lodging and 3 days and 4 workshops and 3 meals a day, gourmet, amazing meals. It's on the Mackenzie River. There's scene analysis, there's open mic, there's swimming, there's yoga. It's amazing. So please go to valerieihsan.com/retreat. And what I'm going to say is currently it's just listed at the full price. If you want a monthly payment option, please email me, Valerie@valerieihsan.com. Email me or the podcast, writercraftpodcast@gmail.com, and let me know you want a monthly payment option, and I will make one for you and just send you a PayPal link. Eric is publishing an anthology, a horror anthology, so he does have a call for submissions out. If you have a short story that is inspired, a horror story inspired by the Pacific Northwest, you can go to caretakerpress.org and get all the information for that. My update, well, I told you about my birthday tomorrow. Yay! My update also, so I use Acuity scheduling. It's a calendar that I use for my clients to book their appointments with. I love Acuity scheduling. It integrates with my Squarespace website. I just really like it. I'm able to set the calendar on a Monday start, which I really dig, and all my planners are set for Monday start. So that's how I look at a week. And if I have to do a Monday start and a Sunday start right next to each other, I get a little wonky and I mix up my days sometimes. So I love the ability to have a Monday start with my Acuity calendar scheduling tool. Anyway, that's what I use. Well, I just started working for this ghostwriting company, and the way they book appointments with their clients is with Calendly. And I know that's like the other top calendar app scheduling software. And I tried to just use my Acuity, but they said no. They wanted it to be system-wide using Calendly. So I went in to look and see if I could do a free Calendly version, which normally, if you're just starting with author services and making appointments and stuff, the free version of Calendly and the free version of Acuity is just perfect for your needs. But because I don't want to manually sync my paper planner and 2 digital calendars, I paid for the standard, like 1 ring up in Calendly. It comes out to, I'm paying it monthly, so it's $12 a month. But if you buy it by the year, then it works out to like $10 a month. Because I can sync my Google Calendar with it. I can't sync Acuity and Calendly together. Unless you are a wizard and you know how to do this, please email me and tell me how to do it. But I've done a bunch of research and looking through Help Center and forums and stuff. And to my knowledge, there is no way to integrate or sync the 2 Calendly and Acuity. So I have Acuity for all my clients, Calendly for this other work job thing that I'm doing, and I'm hoping that the Google Calendar it does sync with will help not have any overbooking. That was probably really complicated, but that's kind of what I've been dealing with for the last 2 days, is trying to set that up. So that is done now, to the best of my knowledge. I do have a new book out for writers. It's called 3-Story Method Writing How-To Books. It is the book that I co-wrote with Thorn and Miranda Weingartner. So you can, there's a link in the show notes. I started, as per my conversation on the podcast last week with Eric, I did start rereading my Goal Setting and Strategic Planning for Writers book, because I am going to publish that as a permafree book on all of the sites. And I'm going to do, so permafree ebook, I do want to have a paper form because it is a planning tool. So I'm going to, it won't be a long enough book to make it like have a spine on it for a traditional sized like, paperback. So what I'm going to do is make it a workbook and maybe even play with the size a little bit. So that the spine is wide enough to have a title on it. And then I thought about, Eric and I talked about it last week on the podcast, because I want this to be like a perma-free thing. I want to maybe even make the audiobook free. And the only way to do that is if I put it on a free site like YouTube or Spotify or something. So yeah, more on that later, but that's kind of the trajectory I'm thinking of for this goal setting book. And it will be book 1 of the Focus and Finish series of books for writers that I want to start publishing. Because this one, like I said last week, I have had it written forever. So I'm just going to read through it and put it up perma-free so that I can tell Eric that I did it next week. And the second book is almost written already too. The second book I think is Accountability for Authors. I've got another book started called Checklists for Authors. So it's going to be that kind of like business end of the like business tools for authors is kind of what the Focus and Finish series is going to be. There might be some craft stuff, coming too, but anyway, that's new, or it's been percolating for years, but it's coming to the surface now. I am going to hire out, I think, for the workbook formatting because I can't make Scrivener do it. I love Scrivener. I use Scrivener for everything, but formatting workbooks where you've got a lot of blank space with lines, I can't make it look super great. I just have to hit the like underline key 500 million times and then the formatting gets off and I don't know. So I think I'm going to hire out for that, for the workbook. So if you know how to make Scrivener do workbooks, please prove me wrong. Send me an email. I did buy the cover already from 100covers.com. I bought it when they were having a sale, so I just need to like order it, and I'll be sure to let the artist know or the designer know that it's going to be a part of a series so that we can like recreate this same stylistic for the whole series. And I have a couple more conferences I want to pitch this week because one of the deadlines is the 31st. I think that's right on the sound. I can't remember. But one of them that I wanted to pitch has a deadline for this Sunday, so I need to do that this week. And tax season, oh my God, it's here and I can't delay it because I was in Turkey all of February, so my mind just wasn't on it. And then this month has just been like one fat recovery. So it's totally on my radar, but tomorrow's my birthday, so I'm not going to do taxes on my birthday. I'm just saying it right now. So no taxes tomorrow. So that leaves Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to start making a dent in the taxes. Because Ali has to go back to Turkey next month to do clearing out the house and putting the house on the market. And so I want to make sure that the taxes are filed before he leaves. Otherwise, yeah, that'll just be a big fat mess. So I'm reading. I just finished The Bookkeeper by Sarah Painter, and now I'm reading a nonfiction book called Worthy, How to Believe You Are Enough and Transform Your Life by Jamie Kern Lima. I've heard her on a couple of different podcasts. She's a really dynamic speaker and has a really amazing origin story. And this book is for a book club that I joined. So I'm going to read that, or I am reading that right now. I'm about a third of the way through. And I've got a couple of other fiction books that are sort of like half started. Sometimes nonfiction doesn't hold my interest all the way through, like I want to set a vibe for the evening or something like that. And I don't want to read nonfiction on personal development when I'm trying to relax or something like that. Or like Sunday morning hot tubs, maybe not so much for the nonfiction, maybe that's for fiction. So I usually have a couple of little fiction things started. And I still am really excited about reading The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, but I did discover that it's not a book that you sit down and read all the way through, really. It's kind of like little essays on, creativity, I imagine. So I've only dipped into that just a little bit. So again, I have started several books and I'm planning on finishing Worthy first, and then I will pick up these others that I have started. All right. I think that is it for the intro. In the show notes for the talk that is coming up, I did put the recommended book list for creative writing, all of the links to those that I mentioned in the talk, and a couple of other mentions, the story rubric, a version and a podcast about the story rubric, and then also the 3-story method worksheet. So in the show notes, you'll find links to those. that you can get online for free. Next week, Eric will be back, and the intro will be more dynamic with 2 people. So here is transforming your manuscript from boring to badass. Talk to you next week. Bye for now.
So today we're going to make your manuscript badass. I'm super excited. This is one of my favorite things to do. As a story analyst, this is what I do for all of my clients. Oops, he wants me to go this way. Okay. All right, so this is kind of what I had thought of as the agenda for today. I want to just talk a little bit about what you're writing and what your expectations are for today. Because I want to make sure you get your money's worth. I do want to talk story structure just a teeny little bit, and then we'll bring out the rubric, which I hope you all have now. It's that one that looks like it's like table, underdeveloped. It says story rubric right in the front. Okay, cool. So we'll go through that. And then I thought we would take a break, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I need to pee in a 3-hour period. So I thought maybe, but do we need 2 breaks? Would you rather do 2 short breaks, or one in the middle? One in the middle? Okay, cool. This badass manuscript writing is going to be for fiction, nonfiction, memoir, creative nonfiction, all of the things. So I still would like to know what you all are writing, though. Can you raise your hand if you are doing something with fiction right now? Almost all of you, maybe even all of you. Okay. What about nonfiction? Okay. And I consider memoir kind of its own thing. So who's writing memoir? Okay. So cool. That gives me an idea of kind of where to go with this. All right, so very briefly, story structure has, well, a beginning, middle, and end, but you need to have something at the beginning of the book to hook you, whether it's it can be something interesting like, oh, I wonder how the Amish live, or, it doesn't have to be like a car crash or something, but something hooks a reader in, right at the beginning of the book, chapter 1, maybe in the first couple pages. The global conflict of the whole book starts at the beginning also. If not the first chapter, it has to be the second. So right at the beginning, because we gotta, want to know why we're reading this book. So something big has to happen in that person's world. So these are my go-to books. I love these books. I reread them all the time. And I think they give the best sort of overview of story structure. I take a little bit from everything and kind of do my own little zhuzhy thing. And so from take off your pants, that tells me really all I've got to do is have a character with a flaw, and by the end of the book, that flaw has to die. And that's the emotional arc of the character. So I read Take Off Your Pants with the character development part. Story hypothesis is great for theme and all the things that fall under that umbrella. And then if you're writing memoir, fast draft or memoir is awesome to help you distill your life into what you're actually going to be writing about. Without telling the whole thing. But it's got some good story structure stuff in it too. So 3-story method is kind of what I'm going for today, because this method works with any other story structure method that you like using. Hero's journey, heroine's journey, save the cat, whatever method you use. This fits really neatly on top of it. So it's 3 C's. The global conflict, the choice, and the consequence. So we think in 3s through the whole book structure, your manuscript, and in Act 1, you're going to have 3 C's as well. Act 2 will have 3 C's. Act 3 will have 3 C's: conflict, choice, consequence. So that free story method worksheet has kind of what we just did verbally right there. So I would like you to be thinking about your own manuscript, your own book, and whether you have written your book or not, if you're just in the editing phase now, and the revision, this is still great to do because you can go back through and see if you have done this. It's also a great pre-planning tool. I use this every time I plot out a book. So first I come up with, in the worksheet it calls it the Pixar pitch. I also like Libby Hawker's story core. A character needs something, has trouble getting it, succeeds or fails at the end. Like, that's kind of the essence of the Pixar pitch. So put the Pixar pitch is what the people would go in to pitch movie story ideas at Pixar. So this is where it came from. So once upon a time, something happens. Every day, something happens. One day, something unusual happens. And because of that, something intense happens. And because of that, something even more intense happens until finally the conflict is resolved. So if you can this is like practicing an elevator pitch. You know, if somebody corners you and says, hey, what's your book about? You need to be able to say what it is in like 2 sentences. Because if you start going, well, it's kind of a mix of, you know, if you start going off on that, then the eyes glaze over and nobody wants to talk to you at that party anymore. So it's great to have a little elevator pitch, just something that you kind of know what this book is about in your head, so that as you're writing it, sometimes I like writing it on a little Post-it note and sticking it on my monitor, just so I have kind of oh yeah, that's what this story is going. It helps me, either if I'm pantsing or if I'm plotting, then I know like what's supposed to come next. Oh yes, don't deviate too far from that because I need to get here. And then the log line, I have issue with the log line. Sometimes I do one and sometimes I don't. It's more like that movie poster thing. Like it's a phrase that will really make you understand what the movie's about, and just by looking at it, just by reading it. So I find that both hard and unnecessary. So sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. All right. So I think that's sort of all I need to show you in this handout, because then the next part of it is just, you know, what is your conflict at the beginning of the story, that global conflict. And then what is the thing that, you know, for the Act 2 choice in the middle, you have to have like that biggest, most difficult decision the protagonist must face in the story. This is where like the flaw kind of dies at the end there. But read Libby Hawker's book, because I really like that one. It's actually a book about outlining, but it's really fun to read. Has anybody read it here? No? Okay.
What's the name of it?
Take Off Your Pants. Referencing either plotting or pantsing. And yeah, so this is a book about stopping writing from the seat of your pants and outlining instead. All right, so I think with that little construction 101, we can go to the rubric. These are the elements of story. So you want to have all of this in your book. And if it is nonfiction, there is another rubric in that Google folder called the nonfiction rubric. And so it's geared towards more elements of a nonfiction book. But it's going to be kind of the same thing as maybe the character is like your customer or something like that. Okay, so characterization Characterization. I really think all stories start with a character. Some people don't. Some people start with ideas. Ooh, what if such and such happened? So, regardless of that, once your character is on the page, we want to see how he's doing over there. if your reader isn't interested in your character and isn't connecting with him or her or them, then they're not going to be interested enough to follow along in the story. So we've got to make them interesting, but also a real person, not just, two-dimensional. So when I have a story diagnostic client, I read through the whole manuscript, beginning to end, with this rubric in mind. So the guy I trained from was a teacher for, almost 2 decades, and he developed this rubric for his kids, for teaching. His kids, kind of like the report card, sort of, but not really. And then he modified it for writers, or for manuscripts. So that's what I use, and when he first started this, I was in one of his classes, and it used to say poor, fair, good, and excellent instead of underdeveloped. And we thought we didn't want to rate anybody, we didn't want to have a poor category that just had too many bad connotations. So it just means it needs to work a little bit. And the cool thing about the rubric is that once let me just wax poetic about the rubric. It has the ability to give the person that you are receiving feedback from, whether it's your critique group or an editor you've paid or your first reader or your beta readers or whatever. So they will have the same vocabulary that you do, and it makes analyzing a manuscript, whether you're the reader or the writer or the reviewer, it's going to be an objective way to talk about it. So it's really nice if you are an editor, it's really nice for talking to your clients in a way that just kind of takes the emotion out of it as best as we can, because it is, their art and there's a lot of them in it too. So it just is a nice way to talk about it. So I go through the whole manuscript and figure out if the characterization of this person, if I feel like he's a real person and I connect to him on some level, that's what I'm looking at. I don't want to say grading or rating, but that's kind of what this is. And when I write a book for myself, when it's my manuscript, I'll go through this process too and make sure after I've written the whole thing, I go back through again and reread it and look and see and rate myself. And then I know I've got a revision checklist then, which makes revision way easier, because then I know just what exact element I need to focus on instead of, okay, I'm gonna start at chapter 1 and start editing my book now. Like, that's really overwhelming. You can say, all right, all I need to do is beef up the dialogue. Sweet. I just go to the places where there's dialogue and tweak it and, and I just do that all the way through. I also really believe in editing passes. So I will do each element at a time instead of, again, like using this as a checklist. So the first one would be characterization. So if you have your character, if you've got a good character, that means he's really distinct in his speech and his actions, mannerisms, all that. And readers really can root for or against the character. Maybe seeing themselves in the character, like they're connected. That's a good character. To make him excellent, he has all those same things: realistic, engaging, dynamic, likable, and readers can become raving fans of the characters, quoting lines for them. Like we all have those movie quotes and things that we say over and over from movies and characters that we remember. So that would make it an excellent character. Somebody that memorable that they put the book down and they wonder for the rest of the year what, about that character. That would be excellent. So if you're rooting for if you're getting feedback from, here's the practical bit then. If you're getting feedback from your critique group that I just didn't get the character, or I don't know what he wants, I just don't care about him. I don't want to read about him. Then that tells you you need to beef up this part. So that if they don't have the rubric and they can't say, oh, the characterization kind of falls a little flat, I rated a fair because I can't really tell the characters apart. They all sort of sound the same. I don't know who anybody is. But if they don't have the rubric and they can't use those words, it's going to come out, well, I just didn't connect with the character, I guess. I don't know. So if you can translate that from layperson and remember, oh, that's what that means, I'm going to go and fix that part. Dialogue is really amazing and scary. It's so nuanced and there's so many pieces to it, and also it's simple at the same time. So I get kind of kerfuffled in there. I really like the Dialogue Doctor, Jeff Elkins. Does anybody know that podcast? Okay, I highly recommend that. The Dialogue Doctor podcast. So Jeff Elkins and I trained together as editors. And his day job is creating AI, like simulated conversations that are really hard to do. So basically what his company does is train individuals how to speak to people in crisis. Or, basically in crisis. So it's a communication tool, and so they've created these like simulated conversations to train these people. So his day job was writing dialogue with realistic characters. And when my teacher heard about that, he was like, dude, that's so awesome. Writers will love that, figure out how to teach writers that. So I really like his podcast and his book and all that. So check out the Dialogue Doctor. So he personally went through and did this dialogue rubric definition. So you can see it's much longer than the rest of them. But basically, when you're looking for dialogue, what I wanted to really point out, and what I see as an editor on my clients' papers coming in all the time, is whether they're seasoned writers or not, and in the first drafting stages, it doesn't maybe naturally come out sometimes, but the inner dialogue is also considered dialogue. So it's not just the words that people are saying to each other out loud. Dialogue talks about the way somebody says something, the underneath what they're saying, the tone of it, the thoughts you're thinking in your head, that's inner dialogue. Your body language, can be considered dialogue, obviously. So those pieces, even if your verbiage, your quips are great and your dialogue out loud to each other is really good, you could get a fair rating maybe on your dialogue because the character isn't talking, you don't see any thought process. There's just a character doing something through the novel. And while that might, give you a really fast-paced read, sometimes it'll be confusing to the reader because they won't know what the character's motivations are, or why this was an important event, because there's no inner dialogue. So being able to put that in, and then practical tip, if someone is saying, I couldn't connect to the reader, we talked about that before, but also it kind of bleeds over. So they can't connect to the character, or the character's making decisions that make no sense. Or he has reactions that don't seem realistic because we don't know the backstory, because we don't know what's in his head. So if you're having trouble writing a relatable character, maybe adding inner dialogue is where you should be looking. Yeah.
What does it mean, dialogue tags?
Oh, cool. Dialogue tags are, it's the he said, she said, asks, whispers, all of those things. So, but a dialogue tag can also be an action tag, where you don't say who is talking, but you have that person do something, which would then make the reader know, if it's in the same line, that it's this person that's doing the talking. So you can eliminate some of those he said, she said. And also he said, she said is, or they said, gotta add that, they said is, it's invisible. After a while you don't really see it. But if you are adding, and so that's good. But if you're adding other dialogue tags like whispered or screamed or, it's kind of jarring, like it almost reads like a Scooby-Doo or something, like he screamed. So yeah, try to eliminate those or, modulate them according to, what your story genre expectations are and the writing style needed for the story. Is there anything else in that really long thing? All right. If you have any questions, by the way, you can totally, hi.
What was the name of the man doing the podcast?
Jeff Elkins, Elkins. But you can just search the Dialogue Doctor for everything. That's his website is thedialoguedoctor.com. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you ever read something in your work and go like, hey, that's too much dialogue, you need more prose?
Have I ever seen that?
Yeah.
So the question was, have you ever gotten feedback that said, you've got too much dialogue and you need more prose? So I personally haven't seen that like in my career, but well, actually that's not true. I have. I remember being in a critique group and her dialogue was great. You can have great dialogue, and I personally don't think that you can have too much dialogue. I think what's missing is the prose. Like, it's not that it needs to be balanced necessarily, but when you only have dialogue, you don't have enough inner dialogue, if that makes any sense. So again, if it's just people doing something or talking without any reflective period after that, even if it's just a sentence, then you're not going to connect with the character. Any other questions? So yeah, these elements kind of bleed into each other too, which really, really is cool when you're editing, because you can do one editing pass for dialogue, and it will cure the characterization and the protagonist's needs and wants. You don't even have, if you're rated fair in all three of those, if you fix one, it'll fix all of them. So that's really cool, and that's really awesome. Also, if you are there any editors in here that do that as a job? Okay, then okay. It just makes it easier to give feedback, I think, whether you're an editor or not. If you're in a critique group, if you see that there is a whole bunch of stuff like this manuscript needs some work, and how am I going to say this? You can just pick maybe the two things that would make the biggest difference, because it will trickle down and fix other things too. So it works awesome both ways, as the author or as the person giving the feedback. Makes the revision letter less scary, that's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the protagonist needs and wants. The reason I said all that was because we just need to know what the dude wants. And if that's not clear, then he's just somebody walking through life again, and we don't really know why we're reading the book. Like, I get irritated with characters after a while, like it's chapter 5 or 7 or something, and I still don't really know why he's there, why he's doing anything. So that makes me an irritated reader, and that makes me put the book down. So being able to be clear about what the protagonist needs at the beginning of the book is going to help your reader kind of like start rooting for him. Like, all right, I know what we're doing. Let's, your reader becomes the wingman, I guess, as they're reading it, and they go along with it. Okay, now I know what we're doing. Let's do it together. But if you don't know what it is, if the reader, doesn't know what it is, then that in revision would be you want to make that clear. And I think what helps with that is knowing, like Libby Hawker's book says about the flaw, that the character has to have a flaw. And if you know what that flaw is, then you can make the opposite of it. Okay, let's see. If she is somebody who can't trust people, then by the end of the book, she has to trust somebody, whether it's for a romantic relationship or like, you know, healing a trauma with parents or something like that. But at the end, this person has to be able to trust again, if that's her flaw. So there'll be the killing, the flaw, and you're going to show the journey of how she started trusting people. And then at the end, this global choice, this choice that the character really has to make, has to be related to that flaw. So, because in order for her to trust again, she has to like kill that flaw, and then she can make the choice. I don't know which comes first. Does she kill the flaw so she can make the choice, or does the act of choosing break the flaw? But they're super entwined. You see what I'm saying? So it becomes really easy to know what the protagonist wants or needs if you know what that flaw is. Because you've got to, she might know what the flaw, she might not know what the flaw is, but the reader will start seeing it based on her behavior. Maybe she, I don't know, I don't do improv, but maybe if she's not trusting somebody as her flaw, then you have to show her doing her flaw at the beginning, maybe even in the first scene, if that works with your story. So you have to show her, I don't know, not trusting the doctor, or, you know, going against somebody else's idea because she thinks she can do it better, or, you know, something that shows that she just doesn't trust other people, she needs to do it alone. And then we not only know what the character's flaw is, we can probably relate to something that's happening on the page too, and we know what she's gonna need by the end. Obviously, she needs to start trusting people, and we might not know what she might not know yet what she wants, but you know it's gonna have to be related somehow to that, if that makes any sense. So again, you can, if you did a good job with that, then the wants and needs of the protagonist are easily identified. Although they are defined, characters do not always act consistently on them. Readers understand the character's motives, but they're often too predictable. So if you want to strive for excellence, then you would be creating more engaging situations that allow, like, I'm trying not to just read what the rubric says, but basically what the rubric says is they're so well developed that it becomes like watching a real person on screen. Like, they're just so real. When they do something, you know what it means, you know that they want this, you know that they need this, and maybe the wants and needs are different, and that's what's going to create the chaos and the tension in your writing. The character arc is that Libby Hawker flaw. We already talked about that. It has to die at the end. That's what shows that character arc, the character change. The really good stories where characters grow and change over the course of the tale is why we read story, I think. That's why I read story, to know how they did it, how they changed, how they grew from this, you know, unfortunate situation, whether I'm reading memoir or fiction. So I really want to get character arc right when I write, because it's important to me. As a reader, it's how it's a good book for me. So I really pay attention to this one. So I think that in all of the books that I've read on story structure and characterization and emotional journey or whatever, Libby Hawker's Sing Up Your Pants book really hit it for me. I don't know, like, maybe I'm hyping it too much probably, and it might not do that for you, but for some reason it was just, it clicked and I understood. Also, when I read that book, I had been trying to squish my manuscript into the hero's journey, and it just didn't work, and it made me feel like a shitty author, and I kept thinking I was not going to get it. I was doing it wrong. And then when I read this book, it was such a lightning bolt of, I just do it in a different way. And this was the way for me. So, okay, that sounds kind of like zealotry, so I'm going to stop.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What was the book again?
Take Off Your Pants by Libby Hawker. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one I keep talking about. I just really like it. She lives in Washington, or she lived in, she moved to the San Juan Islands. So she's a local author. She writes under Olivia Hawker, and she's got some really great historical women's fiction. It's just really good literary work. Okay, genre expectations. You have to know your book, you have to know your genre, you have to know what your readers are going to be expecting, or you're not going to give them what they want. So, making sure that you know your genre, what those obligatory scenes are. If you're writing a thriller, there has to be a chase scene or something, whatever. If it's a romance, it has to have, a first kiss or something like that. Like there's rules, there's not rules, but like there's obligatory scenes. People read this genre to get that scene. And if you don't have that scene, whatever that is, for your genre in the book, then the reader is going to be dissatisfied. Yeah.
Would you also talk a little bit about upmarket writing or literary fiction? Because I found that it's a lot more difficult to fit into a genre because you can slice and dice a number of different ways.
So I work in a indie bookstore also in Eugene, Oregon, and as an author myself, trying to, it's a marketing term really. You just need to know where it fits in the bookstore, what category to put it on under Amazon, what keywords to use. So it's just a marketing thing. And so I would say, when I have a used book, or I work at a used bookstore too. So we get books in and we think, okay, where would people look for this book? And we try to put it in that spot. So women's fiction, upmarket fiction, literary fiction, general fiction, all goes on the same shelf. So it doesn't matter if you call it upmarket fiction, if you call it literary fiction. It kind of does when it comes to the Amazon. Like literary fiction might be like those Spanish translated beautiful writers that, like the poetry and the prose kind of dense stuff. And mainstream fiction is the beautiful, gorgeous writing, but written in a more accessible way, I think. So I love the beauty of literary work, literary fiction, but sometimes I really prefer to just read the mainstream because then I can get the same experience reading the book without the denser language. And so often literary / mainstream, kind of goes all in one. That's how I write in the literary mainstream, or mainstream literary. That has become kind of a genre, I suppose. It's sort of a mix of both of those kinds of works. So I feel like I went on a tangent. Did I answer your question?
I think so. I'm just commenting that it's very difficult to try and choose a genre if you're writing mainstream or literary fiction because it's how you slice and dice. I mean, you can say that it's literary fiction or mainstream or upmarket, but within that category, there will be a number of different things that you could call it.
Yeah, I think what you're saying. So I think that depends on you. I listened to a podcast interview once where the man was a literary horror writer, or thriller, I think. I don't remember if it was thriller or horror now, but he wrote in a very literary style, but he wanted to be in the thriller category because thriller books sell more than literary books. So he called himself a thriller writer, and he was, but it was just, maybe a slower burn. When you watch a movie, that huge category that says drama, it could be like a fast-paced, domestic thriller kind of thing, or it could be Pride and Prejudice. So, yeah. So you can call yourself a thriller writer because that genre sells well, and still write in a more literary fashion. That's just artist's choice. But if you've got elements of sci-fi and fantasy and romance, sometimes that becomes harder to decide what it is. So I would pick the main genre that it is. It might have elements of these other things. Like one of the things I really love to read is like Alice Hoffman stuff, where it's just, there's a tiny hint of magic. I love magical realism because it's just like it's not fantasy, which I don't really dig. Sometimes I like it, but for the most part, I don't like it, but I do like a little bit of magic. It just sort of softens the edges of the real world, or there can be a major difference in somebody, and everybody treats it like it's just a normal thing that this one person has. I don't know, I really dig that. So I would not call that fantasy because that's not its main genre. So if you're writing romantic suspense, which actually is its own genre now, really, but I would just, if it's clearly adventure suspense novel, but there is a side romance, it's not going to be under romance, if that makes any sense. I would just pick the main thing.
What was that author's name? Alice Hoffman?
Alice Hoffman, yeah. She just came out with a book called The Invisible Hour about a girl that was raised in a cult that she escaped from, and I can't remember her invisible power. It was being able to smell a lie or something like that. I don't know. She just had this trait. Anyway, yeah.
Basic question.
Yeah.
I hear the word literary, whatever.
Mainstream,
What's literary? I mean, what is it literary?
The word choice, word choice, really. I mean, if you want to take it down to its barest essential, if you choose to, what makes it literary? Yeah, you want to give it a definition?
Part of what makes writing literary is that there's a great deal of foreshadowing. There's a lot of potential work. I'm not sure. I'm not a fan of it, so I can't speak from a fan's viewpoint. But there's a potential, anyway, to really study the manuscript and identify the elements that led up to different aspects of the story. It's much more intellectual, kind of a...
Yeah, I think it can be. Yeah, I think it has to do with the way you see the world and the way you write about it. If you're thinking about I'm trying to think of an example of, it's just word choice. I don't know how to explain it. Sorry, yeah.
Here's a definition. What makes it literary versus
Well, but I love to read it, so does that make me hoity-toity? I don't know. I dig it. I love it. The main difference appears to be the purpose. Literary fiction aims to provide insight that creates a stronger understanding of the world and of the human condition. Genre fiction can tackle complex themes as well, but it's a more of an entertaining story that allows the reader to escape from reality. I don't know what that source was, but that was one person's opinion. Yeah.
put Agatha Christie's writing means
In the bookstore, we put her under mystery, which is a genre.
I wanted to give an example of Henry Gabaldon's Outlander series.
That is so mixed around.
Exactly.
We put it in the bookstore, we put it in fantasy.
Oh, you put it in fantasy, because most bookstores put it in general fiction.
Yeah, that's true. Barnes and Noble will put it in general fiction, but our little indie, hippie store doesn't. Who?
But
I don't recognize. You had your hand up first.
Somebody said Agatha Christie, and I would put Aggie under genre. But Dorothy Sayers, who was another queen of mystery at the same time, is leaning more towards literary in some of her stuff.
I haven't read her, so I can't compare the two. In our bookstore, we just put it under mystery, but
And Dorothy Sayers is categorized under mystery,
Mhm.
where Agatha Christie is just a plain old good, don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
solid whodunit. Dorothy Sayers explores really big themes.
so that would be personally who I would want to read. So I look for, when I started working in the bookstore, I was like, all right, I gotta not be a snob about what I read. I need to read everything so I can be helpful. Like if somebody comes up and says, oh, I just read, where did the crawdads sing? What do you got that's like that? If I haven't read it, then I can't help you. So I try to bounce around and, stretch myself in all directions. So what I did was look for elements of that. What I look for is writing style that is more literary in the genre that I'm trying to read in. So like when I went into mystery, what I ended up liking was Tana French and Louise Penny, Mary Stewart, I think is her name, so they just have a different way of looking at life. Yeah.
I would classify Clever Kingsolver as literary fiction because you have a lot of.
I would too.
You have layers of symbolism, metaphor, images. The focus is on kind of sentence structure and image building, so the pace is going to be slower.
Yeah, I would say so. Mhm.
So that's how I would describe literary fiction.
Okay, what about, does anybody else want to say anything? Memoir expectations. I'm speaking tomorrow about memoir, so I will skip that one for now. Then you can come tomorrow and hear about that one. Setting and world building. This one is so interesting. I have analyzed myself about this. Not that I'm saying I'm interesting, but I love to read books with setting that is so juicy and humid and real that it's its own character. I love that stuff. And I can't write it for shit. So, I don't know why that is. Usually that's the thing you're good at. If you really like something in a book, you study it and you read it all the time and you're good at it. So what I've come to the conclusion is it's so vivid and rich in my brain when I'm writing it that I don't put it in because I just kind of feel like it's already there. So I think that's why I suck at it. But that means this is the very first editing pass I do on all my work. Is go back in and add all the setting, all the juicy bits, all and also I forget that the setting and world building is also like the time passing. That's part of it, and I forget about that. Or like all my scenes take place in spring in the garden, but the course, it's like a year long. So I need to make sure my seasons are appropriate. That's part of the setting too. Emotional tone, I think this is really amorphous. So I really focus on using the rubric when I'm giving feedback, either to myself or to somebody else. So I guess the idea is that it's not only the vibe of the book, is it scary, is it ominous, is it gothic, what's the vibe of the book, but also that there's peaks and valleys in, you know, like one time I watched a movie and I white-knuckled the chair the entire movie, and it was exhausting, and I felt sick at the end of it. So you've got to have some spaces where your reader can breathe, you know, especially if you're writing something that's, you know, traumatic or just, you know, intense. So that's part of emotional tone. I don't know, is there any question about emotional tone? I feel like I kind of covered. I don't really have a pithy story for that one. Well, I guess I did. The Blade Runner, or whatever that movie was that I watched, that I couldn't stop gripping the chair for. Okay, theme. Theme's gonna take a little bit. Mostly I'll talk about this tomorrow because I feel like this is part of the core message. But in case you don't take my class tomorrow, theme is a statement about life or the world that you are proving or